Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the 2020 Scottsdale Mayoral Candidate Forum. My name is Terrence Thornton. I'm Managing Editor at Independent News Media, and I will serve as moderator for the event. Before we begin, I would like to thank our hosts and sponsors of the event, Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce, the Scottsdale Coalition of Today and Tomorrow, Scottsdale Leadership, the Times Media Group, Independent News Media, and of course, the City of Scottsdale. Now on to today's program. Today's program will include 2-minute opening remarks from our candidates, who are Lisa Borowski, Suzanne Clapp, Virginia Cordy, Bob Littlefield, and David Ortega. Following the opening remarks, we will have a question and answer series with 30-second response from questions that were curated by the host committee, which I participated on, and I helped curate the questions. For the 30-second responses, we will allow one response. However, we will allow one rebuttal at my discretion. Following the question and answer period, we will have a hard stop at 1:20 and begin closing remarks. And without further ado, I believe that we should begin. Ms. Borowski, the virtual floor is yours. You're on mute.
As many times as we practice. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. Hello to my fellow candidates, and hello to all the Scottsdale residents watching today. I am excited about the opportunity to once again serve this great city. A little bit of background about me. I was born and raised in the Valley, moved to Scottsdale when I was very young. We became very passionate, my family did, with horses, and it took us out to North Scottsdale. I'm raising my daughter here. She was born and raised here. I started my business here many years ago. I've been a practicing lawyer for about 24 years now, and I previously served on the city council from 2009 to 2013. As many of you remember, that was during the Great Recession. So we had our hands full at that time, digging out of a crisis that was monumental, really, to our city's financial situation. So while that was not in existence this year as I entered the race, that certainly is a very big issue now as we proceed. Talking about what did bring me back to looking to enter the race for mayor, prior supporters came to me and asked me if I would consider it. And having heard over the last few years from many people in Scottsdale about their concerns related to development issues, and then of course with the South Bridge really debacle, I guess you could say, I was absolutely motivated to step in and serve and bring, restore, I should say, a great vision for what Scottsdale has been, what it can be, and what it will be into the future. And so I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to hear the questions and get to know everyone here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Borowski. Ms. Clapp, the virtual floor is yours. 2 minutes to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about the job of mayor. That's my primary interest today. I've got 3 qualities that I think are important in being mayor of Scottsdale. First is my commitment to improving the city. I've been elected 3 times to serve on the city council over the course of 12 years. And I intentionally moved my retail business here 22 years ago, and I ran it while serving on the city council. My business experience also helps inform my decision-making on the council. I've worked in a wide-ranging number of businesses over the years, including my first job out of college was with Whirlpool Corporation, large manufacturer, and I had a variety of jobs over the course of 14 years. I also owned my own small manufacturing company. After that, for 5 years, we produced plastic component parts for other manufacturers. I was general manager in Los Angeles after that for a worldwide distribution center called Larson Jewell. as well as then went into the retail business and moved that business to Scottsdale in 1998. So the third quality is my leadership and consensus building abilities, which I think are needed as mayor. I've graduated from 2 leadership programs in my hometown. I graduated from Leadership Evansville, where I was president of the organization after graduation. I've also graduated from Valley Leadership. I've led a number of successful ballot measures over the course of the last few years that were approved by voters while I was on city council. I'm past chairman of the Valley Metro RPTA, which operates the regional transit system. I'm also on MAG's Transportation Policy Committee. So I'll talk to you more about my qualifications later. I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Excellent, Ms. Clapp. Thank you very much. Ms. Cordy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. You know, we all agree that Scottsdale is a great place to live, work, learn, and fulfill dreams. I'm Virginia Cordy, and I'm a second-generation Arizona native. I've lived here in Scottsdale for 33 plus years and with deep roots. My family was vested down in southern part of Scottsdale at Ray Cordy Chevrolet for 28 years. And that's where I cut my teeth in business. That's where I learned how to manage millions of dollars of inventory and be responsible for 200 employees and families, and also be responsible for satisfying thousands of customers every year. Throughout those years of Ray Cordy Chevrolet and continuing to today, I'm very much involved in our community. Many boards and commissions over the last 7+ years, and then also having served on city council for 7.5 years. I'm particularly proud of my volunteer work and commitment to our McDowell Storm Preserve. I chaired the original task force back in 1994 that created the whole premise of the preserve. We coined the name, we established the values of the preserve, and those are all very important as we move through today. I believe that as we move through the next couple of years, that fiscal responsibility and transparency is going to be paramount. We need to be innovative leaders today, and we need to be able to lead out of this COVID recession, and leadership is going to matter. We also need to keep our taxes low. Our growth, you know, if we don't continue to grow, we're going to decline. But that growth must be strategic. It also must be adaptive and transformative to meet the needs of our next generation. And quality of life is certainly the number one issue for people, for our citizens. And in that quality of life, we must sustain our mountain preserve. We must grow our arts and culture as a community. We must advance our pedestrian and bicycle-friendly streets, and also adopt an urban forest program that I'd like to
Ms.
talk about.
Cordy,
Yes,
thank
I'm
you.
done.
You went
Thank
out of time. Sorry about that. Mr. Littlefield, on to you, sir. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Terrence. Over the last 2 years, the citizens of Scottsdale have done a couple of amazing things. They organized to protect the preserve from commercial development. They elected citizen-friendly council candidates by unprecedented margins, and they fought unbridled overdevelopment in downtown. I was part of all those efforts, and I think that right there says a lot about why people should vote for me. All this activism makes it clear Scottsdale citizens want to change from the current policy of toxic overdevelopment pursued by our current city council majority. I'm running to give voters a resident-friendly alternative for mayor who will lead Scottsdale to grow and evolve in a way that preserves our special character and high quality of life. Now, let's talk about the future for a minute. Obviously, in the last few months, a lot of things have changed. So not only are you looking for a candidate who's resident-friendly, but you're going to be looking for a candidate who has a plan for the future. You're going to be looking for a candidate who can hit the ground running and deal with the budget crisis and deal with the drops in revenue. With a bold action and out-of-the-box thinking, we can go beyond merely surviving this pandemic-induced downturn. We can emerge better equipped to make our city finances more robust and sustainable now into the future. and I'm the best qualified candidate to do that. In the 12 years I was on the city council, I was on the budget committee, I was on the economic development committee. I was probably the single most fiscally conservative council member that there was during that time. I have business experience. As a Vietnam combat veteran, I certainly know about what it's like to deal with adversity and to keep moving. And for all those reasons, I believe I'm the best candidate right at this moment to lead Scottsdale into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Very well timed. Mr. Ortega,
Yeah, not
the
bad,
floor
huh?
is yours. Not bad. You, Mr. Ortega.
Hello, Scottsdale. I'm Dave Ortega. I came to Scottsdale when I was 23 to work as an apprentice architect with Benny Gonzalez, the architect of City Hall and the Civic Plaza. I was lucky. I met Rosemary Gannon. We got married. We bought our house near Saguaro High, where Rosemary grew up. We were blessed with 2 children, and they loved Scottsdale schools and their neighborhood friends. In 1984, I opened my architect office in Old Town. Now, each of us has our own story of how Scottsdale shaped us and how we shaped Scottsdale. My highlight was taking the oath of office to serve as city council. When I held office, Scottsdale passed Bond 2000 to build $350 million citywide projects, started the general plan outreach leading to the adoption of General Plan 2001. And then September 11th hit our nation. Today, COVID-19 has destabilized the world economy and crushed city revenues. We passed Bond 2019 citywide projects, which will move ahead. But the general plan is 10 years overdue. City Council failed to craft and adopt a general plan when all the surrounding cities got theirs done. This opened the gate for speculators to ask for subsidies in the form of upzoning and high-density developments. Southbridge 2 was the worst case, leading to the referendum to overturn the council. Also, council had to be told not to build the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve. I voted yes on Prop 420. As mayor, I will listen to all stakeholders, learn from their viewpoints, and build a vibrant, sustainable Scottsdale.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. We will now jump into the question and answer portion of the program here. And we're going to start with the first one in alphabetical order. Then we're going to jump around a little bit to keep everybody on their toes. So the first question will be to you, Ms. Borowski, and you have 30 seconds to respond to that question. And then we will jump through alphabetical order. So here's the question. Scottsdale is facing a daunting financial challenge due to pandemic precautions wreaking havoc on typical revenue streams. What qualifications do you have that will give you insight on how to lead the city through uncertain financial times ahead? Ms. Borowski, to you.
I have direct and relevant experience with this situation that we're confronting. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I got elected in 2008, which was right in the midst of the Great Recession. I led the charge to establish the Citizens Budget Commission, and that was a very instrumental body of citizens. Each one was appointed by one of the council members, and we, with the Budget Commission, they were very effective in digging in with us, the council at the time, to identify and really flesh out what we could do to stop the bleeding and to recover, slowly but surely, as we saw our way through that. And I'm proud of that experience and that decision. Unfortunately, the council has since disbanded. The council after that 4 years disbanded the Citizens Budget Commission, which was very disappointing. And I would immediately look to restore that. I think that
Lisa, you're at time. I'm sorry to interrupt. Ms. Clapp, 30 seconds to you. What skill sets do you have that make you the right choice to guide the city during uncertain financial times?
Well, as I mentioned, I've got 40 years experience in business, owning my own businesses as well as working for other businesses. I have an MBA that teaches me a lot about how to run a business and about how to create a budget for the city. I have run my own business through 9/11 and through the recession, and I've worked on 12 budgets now for the city of Scottsdale. So I think I pretty much know how to work on this one and on the ones that will come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clapp. Ms. Cordy, to you, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Terrence. With 20 years of experience at Ray Cordy Chevrolet, I lived through 3 different recessions in 20 years. And when sales plummet, you look to other sources of income to sustain your organization. It's called the ability to adapt. I also headed up the Chamber of Commerce for several years. And that was bringing back the chamber from a time of low income to a vibrant organization. And also I headed up STARS, Scottsdale Training and Rehabilitation Services, a nonprofit for developmentally disabled. I started in 2007, the beginning of the recession. I ended in 2014 and brought that organization back to a healthy state.
Thank you, Ms. Cordy.
Thank you.
Mr. Littlefield, to you.
Well, I have had many years of experience as a manager, general manager for several large computer companies. I spent 10 years running my own Scottsdale-based computer networking company. In the 12 years I was on the city council, I was on the budget committee, I was on the economic development committee, and I was on the audit committee. So I believe I probably have more experience in terms of budget and economic development than pretty much anybody up here.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Mr. Ortega, to you. Dave, you're on mute. Start again.
Thank you. I've been an architect for almost 40 years, which always involves spending other people's money. But when I served as city councilman, we were shocked by the 9/11 attack. We had to regroup. We had to work in collaboration and come up with plan B and C. And what that meant was organizing your leadership, getting the city management and all of their resources and looking at our assets. And that's how we're going to get through this COVID-19 presently right in our face.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. So the next question, you're going to lead us off, Dave. So the question is this: in response to COVID-19, should the city adopt long-term structural changes to its budget and the way it spends money for the foreseeable future? Mr. Ortega, to you.
Okay. The COVID-19 pandemic will cause us to react both short-term and long-term. The long-term vision and our ability to sustain our city and keep moving forward has to be based on where we came from and where we want to go. And largely that's due to the conversation that is generally called a general plan conversation. We need to be able to look at our assets as we would for the different medical community, the different long-term structures that are already there in place. So everyone has been knocked down and crushed by the pandemic. But what we do is we want to continue on course and not make any rash decisions or think that we need to make radical changes to succeed.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Mr. Littlefield, to you.
Absolutely. We need to make some changes in how we do business in the long term. I actually have been asking for this for years, dating back to when I was on the council, because what happens is the way we do business now, we end up with these boom and bust cycles. So there's a number of things, and it'll take longer than 30 seconds, but we need to do a whole lot of things that are structural changes to make our budget not just balanced every year, but sustainable. Right now, it's not, as you can see, by the $800 million we were behind that required a bond issue, which still isn't covering all that. So yeah, I have a whole list of sustainable changes in how we do business long-term listed on my website, and certainly more than 30 seconds to talk about here. But yeah, the answer to your question is yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, Bob. Ms. Cordy, to you, 30 seconds. You're on mute, Virginia. Start over.
Sorry.
It's
So
okay.
we've already reacted to the COVID economic downturn. We've reduced 20% of our budget today, and our current budget for 20 and 21 reduces it another 10 to 15%. I do not believe it's wise to make structural decisions at this point because we don't have data to make those decisions upon. I think we need appropriate financial data to make those decisions, and we have created the mechanism to do that by meeting monthly to oversee the monthly financials and be on top of those changes and make decisions as we go.
Thank you, Virginia. Suzanne, to you.
Well, we did make structural changes to the budget back in the Great Recession. We lost probably 400 people by the time it was over, and most of those people have not come back. So there was a big change back then. Today, in dealing with COVID-19, we are talking about making changes again and have, as has been mentioned, reduced our budget significantly. But I think the changes that we now make will be more strategic and aim toward making sure that we can maintain our city services and also provide all the capital projects that the voters have requested from us. So there's strategic plans happening right now.
Thank you, Ms. Clapp. Ms. Borowski, to you.
Yes, I think in terms of structural changes related to COVID, what I would say to that is this creates an opportunity to really look deeply at what can be improved, what efficiencies can be had in the budget, what redundancies can be eliminated. For example, positions might be combined, or certain jobs might be unnecessary moving forward due to technology. It's a real opportunity, just like it was during the Great Recession. While it's definitely a downturn and there's many downsides, it creates the opportunity to look at the budget closely and identify where we can save money for the taxpayers. I've always felt that Scottsdale, the budget is overly reliant on development revenue, new development revenue. So I think that's certainly something we should be looking at as we move forward.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, on to the next question. And Lisa, you're going to lead us off on this one. Do you think it is proper to accept political contributions from anonymous sources for any reason? Furthermore, do you think that the city should adopt a stricter code to better understand where political contributions are coming from? Lisa, to you.
Yes, this is a difficult one to answer in 30 seconds.
I understand.
I don't believe that anonymous contributions political to a campaign should be allowed, and I don't believe they are allowed. If you receive a political contribution for your campaign or while in office, you're required to disclose it. I guess the disclosure would be anonymous at that point. I don't want to make any confusion because I don't think that was the recent case with council with the ethics investigation that was just before the council. So I think that's a different set of facts. However, I will say also that I think there has to be a real close look at the ethical rules, the code that governs contributions at the city of Scottsdale, starting with, I think most glaring is the fact that it's perfectly allowable for people that have an interest and an issue before the city to make political contributions, which certainly would seem to sway the outcome of a council member's decision.
Thank you, Lisa. Ms. Clapp, question to you.
Yes, the ethics code that was mentioned is being reviewed right now. And I do believe we need to revisit the concept of anonymous gifts that was brought up during the case related to Councilman Phillips. There should be no provision anywhere where a candidate or or either a councilman or a board member or commissioner can take an anonymous gift. It should not be allowed. And so that's the primary purpose, I believe, of your question as far as the ethics code is concerned.
Yes, Suzanne, thank you very much. Ms. Cordy, to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Terrence. Please know that with the ethics code and the conversation we had last week, that I was the only council member that objected to the findings of the 3-judge panel because they created in their findings the loopholes that allows anonymous donations to a city council person or candidate, and allows personal gifts to be given anonymously, and other things. Yes, we are moving forward with that closing of the loophole, but we should have done it on Tuesday night.
Thank you, Ms. Cordy. Mr. Littlefield, to you.
Well, anonymous political contributions are currently not allowed. They all need to be reported. There's always probably some people who are trying to game that system, but it's also incumbent upon you guys in the press to report on that. So when our campaign finance reports come out, you guys need to let people know where, because most people are not going to go on the web and read the campaign finance reports directly themselves. And but yeah, they aren't allowed, and they should be reported, and people should know where that money's coming from. Yes.
Mr. Ortega, to you.
You're on mute.
I believe in full transparency, and all disclosures must be made. There's no room for anonymous donations or any corruption in our election system. I think the latest cases did expose some areas that need to be addressed by the city council and both the ethics review. And that will take an agendized item. It's not going to be handled as a subset to a ethics complaint or accepting an ethics complaint. So it's important that that judge group expose those deficiencies, and we'll see if we can correct them.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Moving on, and we're going to start with Ms. Clapp on this one, so pay attention because we're going to jump around. During these uncertain times, what would you do as mayor to unite residents behind a collective vision of the future?
Well, I think it's important to unite the council as well as unite residents. So I would first work on developing great relationships with the city council members and reaching out to the community so that we can collectively have a vision for the city that we in many ways do not have today. So I think it's important to be able to work with people of all kinds and types throughout the city as well as on the city council, and have the ability to come together to come to some common ground that will actually work for the benefit of the city of Scottsdale.
Thank you, Ms. Clapp. Bob, to you.
Well, we actually do have a collective vision for the city. It's called the general plan. It's the one thing that's voted on by the citizens. So that should be, and is supposed to be, the guiding document for all of our development. Unfortunately, if you look back over the last 12 years, you'll see a large number of exceptions made to the general plan, which I think is a problem. Now, we did put a general plan update on the ballot back in 2011. It was a bad update, and in fact, I worked to defeat it. And since then, we have not come up with, or the council has not come up with, a resident-friendly general plan update. I would like to see, if I become mayor, put together a group and come up with a resident-friendly general plan update and put it before the voters. And then we need to stick to that, because that's the only thing the voters say that is our plan for the future.
Thank you, Bob. Ms. Cordy, to you.
Thank you. You know, our community was built on collective vision, a community vision, and it goes back to the 60s in the step forms. It goes back to the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. We have not had a community collective vision since the 90s. I am proposing that we move forward with a Scottsdale Community Conversations 2050 that will bring our community together, open conversations, long process of over a year to talk about what we want this community to be. And it would be a collective, open community conversation together.
Thank you, Virginia. Lisa, to you.
Can you repeat that question, Terrence, for me?
Sure. During these uncertain times, what would you do as mayor to unite residents behind a collective vision of the future?
I would have a platform and a program to restore citizen and direct involvement. I think that there's an opportunity to do that, as I discussed with the Budget Commission. I also think we should take a hard look at area representation, for example, districting or neighborhood advisory panels, especially where the general plan is concerned. I think that we should look to, or we should transition to direct appointments from council members for certain boards and commissions, perhaps all of them. In particular, the Planning Commission, I think that's a critical change that needs to happen. I think that the citizens, especially as evidenced by recent reactions to projects that have been approved, they feel left out of the process and they feel their voices have not been heard, and they feel that these decisions have been out of touch with what they want.
Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Ortega.
The best relationship of government and citizen and government is at the local level. It should be at the local level because that's where we live in our neighborhoods. That's where our businesses operate. But unfortunately, City Hall has fractured that relationship. You've just heard that the past councils have not been able to put together a general plan, which is that voice or conversation. For the last 10 years, they've not been able to do it. And that's where, if you don't have a conversation, you can talk about a future gathering of conversation, but that's where the leadership has failed. And I believe I bring leadership because I do listen. I know what stakeholders are saying, and then I can lead that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. And Dave, you're going to lead us off on this one. Nope, changed my mind. Virginia, you're going to lead us off on this one, because I don't think you started one yet. Okay, so this is a long-winded question, but it's a good one. The long-term sustainability of Scottsdale's economic, social, and environmental future is an important theme in the current proposed general plan. As mayor, how would you champion sustainability in Scottsdale? And what goals and associated metrics would you propose to ensure our quality of life going forward? It's a mouthful. Virginia, to you.
Could you send that to me in a typed form, please? No, I'm kidding.
Yes, no problem.
Sustainability or resiliency is an important aspect of any community. Economically, we need to diversify our economy. We need to lessen our our dependence on tourism and really build high wage jobs with good corporate citizens, good corporate companies. Environmentally, I think we need to do a better job environmentally. We've got a green building code, but let's talk about not only sustaining our preserve, but also expanding that preserve concept with an urban forest program that will lessen our ambient temp and also clean our air by carbon dioxide sink. I know there's more. It's 30 seconds.
It's true. Virginia, thank you. Mr. Ortega, to you.
Repeat the question again. Was it about general plan or diversification and long range?
No problem. The long-term sustainability of Scottsdale's economic, social, and environmental future is an important theme in the current proposed general plan. As mayor, how would you champion sustainability in Scottsdale, and what goals and associated metrics would you propose to ensure our quality of life moving forward?
Well, at the general plan level, all stakeholders have to be involved. Businesses, churches. One of the most important one that is rarely mentioned is our relationship with schools. Even the Scottsdale School District, they feed children, they educate our children, they are our future. So what are we really sustaining for. We have to look at all those partnerships where the city can build better relationships. This COVID situation really brought that forward because we started talking about complete families, neighborhood centers, schools, and so forth. From that, and working people and working corporations, our entire medical industry community is all bound together. And we can get there together once we have a really full general plan adoption. And I will lead that discussion to make sure it happens.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Mr. Littlefield, to you.
Well, it's no coincidence that the motto of my campaign is keep Scottsdale special. Scottsdale is better place to live than other places. It does have a special and unique character. And that actually is not just part of our quality of life, it's also part of our economic development. Scottsdale has always been a net importer of tourists and a net importer of shoppers. And that's because we're a special place to visit. So the first thing we need to do is to not kill the goose that laid the golden egg. So we need to look at what makes Scottsdale special. Well, high standards for design, development, code enforcement, lots of open space, unobstructed views of the natural landscape, low density, and a Western character that's unique. We need to preserve those things to preserve not only the quality of life for our residents, but to make Scottsdale an attractive place to come and shop and be a tourist. And I would also say that one thing we have to do that's a huge change from what's been happening for the last 12 years is we have to make development, whatever development we allow, we have to make sure it pays for itself, which clearly hasn't been happening for the last 12 years.
Thank you, Bob. Lisa, to you.
Scottsdale's brand is very unique. We are known throughout the country, internationally, as how I would describe a high-end luxury destination. And that is why we are such a tourism draw. I think that we need to continue to focus on what keeps Scottsdale a focal point for tourists from all over the world. And that is, we are a high-end luxury community. We have a lot of open space. We have a relaxed style about us. We're not a huge high-rise downtown. We have residents that are very proud of where they live and where they come from. We have outdoor activities, and I think that we really need to get back to focusing on what makes us so special. And by the way, the tourism drives residents to move here. It drives companies to move here, their headquarters, for example, here to Scottsdale, and it certainly drives revenue by bringing tourists here.
Thank you, Lisa. Suzanne, take us home on this one.
Well, I would agree that tourism is very important in Scottsdale. It represents about 52% of the city's budget. So we obviously are a very tourism-driven community, but we also have to, and I believe I will, work towards strengthening our business community. It needs to be as strong as the tourism side of the business in Scottsdale. And that includes helping businesses grow and thrive in Scottsdale. And it helps us to develop a better job base here in Scottsdale so that we can create a better form of taxes for everyone and keep our taxes low. So tourism and economic development work together as far as the environment. Scottsdale has been pretty good in being recognized as an environmentally friendly city. We could always do more, but we did create the preserve. We have 1/3 of our city that is either preserve parks or open space. And yes, there's more that we can do. And I think we just need to continue to focus on what we can do to improve our position as far as water sustainability, the built environment, as well as open spaces. So there's a great deal of things we can do, and 30 seconds really doesn't cover it. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I understand. Okay, next question. We're going to start talking about downtown Scottsdale, everyone's favorite place to visit. And let's start with, I don't think, Suzanne, have you led one off yet? I don't think you have. So Suzanne, we're going to start with you. Specific to downtown Scottsdale, when elected mayor, how will you balance developer desires with resident perspectives?
Well, I do that now in listening to the business community and the residents about a variety of issues that come before the council. And when surveys have been taken about the city of Scottsdale and our ability to react to what the businesses and residents in the city want, the majority, 96% of the people in the city feel that the city is doing a great job in listening to their interests and providing the services that they want. So I believe we should just continue to do that. If we could make it 97 or 98%, all the better. But from my perspective, we are now listening to both the business community and the residents and trying to strike a balance. But in the final analysis, when it relates to downtown, which is your question, it has to be what's good for the entire 258,000 citizens in Scottsdale, not just a small group of people.
Understood. Thank you, Suzanne. Lisa, to you.
I think the question was, how do you balance the developer's interests with the residents? So I'm going to focus on that. I think that there has to be a healthy balance. You certainly need to factor in the residents that are in the downtown area. You've asked about downtown, but this same principle applies to all over our city. Balancing new development or redevelopment with the existing citizens that are in residence and business owners. And it has to be about moderation. It has to be in keeping with the character of Scottsdale historically. Just because somebody wants to build something, 15 stories high and massive does not mean that should happen. There has to be a collaborative effort to make sure the citizens and stakeholders that currently exist there are respected and brought into the process. And I think we can do really great things. I'm the first one to say that I think downtown and Old Town needs restoration and some redevelopment. And I think it can be spectacular. There should be a vision though.
Thank you, Lisa. Dave, to you.
Well, I've lived in Scottsdale 41 years. I've practiced architecture. I've done over 20 buildings in Old Town Scottsdale. I know Scottsdale downtown inside and out. And Scottsdale, and those buildings fit, by the way. It means understanding what the draw is. And yes, all buildings will wear out. The basic fundamental problem that's been occurring is speculators come in with options on property. Okay, for instance, the Blue Sky property, that developer had options on land. On the Southbridge, he had options on property. In other words, subject price and the profit on those were all based on some spreadsheet, not really what Scottsdale's about. I am what Scottsdale's about. I've lived it, I've designed it, I understand it, and I understand when speculation and really a spreadsheet gets too big for its pants, and it causes problems, agitation, and regular citizens know it, and we can change that with a more sensible balance with a lower profile buildings.
Thank you, David. Virginia, to you.
Thank you. So we do have a vision for Old Town, and it's called the Old Town Character Area Plan. Spent several years in creating that. It's also built on many tourist consults and research programs called Tourism 2.0 and other studies that have really developed our Old Town vision. Only about 5% of our Old Town is designated for the heightened density that, let's face it, that Southbridge 2 was the controversial issue, and that's where this question comes from, the premise that Southbridge 2 created, I think, some confusion amongst our residents. We have two mayoral candidates that supported a referendum to put to bed Southbridge 2, and they were successful. But let's face it, Southbridge 2, the developer had 150 adjacent property owners supporting that Southbridge 2, and there were only 3 against. So let's talk about who's listening to whom. And I believe that development in Old Town The character area plan provides that template, and let's listen to not only the residents, but also the businesses that are within Old Town and that live with that degradation.
Thank you, Virginia. Bob, to you. Finish up.
Well, if you look at the results of the last 2 years, you can see that clearly the citizens of Scottsdale don't believe that their interests are being balanced with the interests of developers. If you look at 420, if you look at the Southbridge referendum, if you look at the results of the last council elections, it's pretty clear that the citizens of Scottsdale are not happy with the direction the current council majority is taking, and they want something different. Right now, the developers are ahead. That's the only conclusion you can draw from what's been happening from the last 4 years. And I think Southbridge was really an indication of that. In 28 days, the people who organized the Southbridge referendum managed to get 17,000 signatures, a Herculean task, but they did it.
Thank you, Bob. Next question. And Bob, you're going to lead us off. What do you think downtown Scottsdale should look like in 15 years, both physically and from a usage perspective?
Well, what I don't want, well, first of all, I should say that it's not about what I want, it's what the residents want. And once again, that goes back to the general plan. The general plan is what the residents have told us they want all parts of Scottsdale to look like. But I'll make an obvious point. If you want people to come to downtown Scottsdale, you don't want it to look like just any town USA. If our downtown just becomes a pale copy of Tempe or Phoenix or Gilbert, nobody's going to come here. And because we're a net importer of tourists and shoppers, that's a bad thing. So I want downtown to continue to be unique.
Thank you, Bob. Suzanne, to you.
Downtown, Terrence, I got a question. Are you seeing me full on, or is this just down in the bottom of your screen? Just a question.
I'm seeing you through the screen.
A full screen?
No. I have a grid view.
Okay, my question was, I see everybody else full screen, but I don't see my own. So I had just a technical question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so what do I think downtown will look like in the next 15 years?
Yep.
Part of that will come from our discussion about the general plan that's taking place now and will go to the voters in 2021. But I believe that downtown will be seen as an exciting place to be and a great attraction. And if you'll remember that last year, or maybe it was the year even before, it was a unanimous vote of the entire council to include 150-foot tall building sections within downtown. So this was nothing new that was introduced by a developer. It's been approved already by the full council. So I believe that you will see some tall buildings and you'll see some lower rise buildings. You'll see a lot of people living there and a great deal of activity.
Thank you, Suzanne. Virginia, to you.
Thank you, Terrence. Downtown in 20 years, 10 year, 20 years. It's important to have a balance in downtown, a balance of residents, a balance of businesses, Class A office space, attraction to our visitors, and also pedestrian friendly. I think sometimes we miss that important component of a core downtown, which is a core to any community, to being pedestrian friendly. We need to better connect our little districts of downtown with safer ways to walk and to ride a bike so that our tourists can enjoy all of town. But it's that 24/7 residential component that is going to sustain our downtown, because tourists alone is not going to do it.
Thank you, Virginia. David, to you.
Well, the so-called Old Town character plan doesn't even look like Scottsdale. It was called Old Town, but it may as well be called New Town, because it's not protecting the heritage, the person-to-person scale that we have. Right now, the Old Town, so-called New Town, is just going to blade the downtown. And what was missing is they did not understand the impact of the infrastructure and the gridlock on our roads. The roads aren't any wider in any of those scenarios. So all of that has packed in an opportunity for speculators to think, gee, this is great. We're just going to, they've given us the go ahead to blade it all. That's not going to happen. At the most, the buildings in the character area should be 3 stories. They should retain the walkability, the shading, and that character. That's what Scottsdale's about. And most areas didn't even want to build 3 stories. 2 stories is enough.
Thank you, David. Lisa, to you. Take us home.
In terms of what I see Old Town and Downtown looking like in 10 to 15 years, I think that we need to respect the character historically of the downtown, Old Town area. I think the way that we identify how to move forward with development and redevelopment is we impanel a neighborhood advisory committee or commission that is solely focused on what the vision of downtown and Old Town is. We've heard some talk about there is a plan for this. Well, certainly it appears the plan has backfired because there's a bunch of dissatisfaction out there with people that live in the area. I live at Optima Camelview, and I'm sitting in my office on the first level of Optima Camelview. I am not afraid of height or density. I think we just need to really focus on the level of development that we're bringing into our community. That goes back to the sustainability question too. It also has to be far safer down here. It has to be much safer to walk along the streets. I mean, the sidewalks really are not built to accommodate a lot of pedestrian traffic or bike traffic. So that's a very big priority, as well as parking for me.
Thank you, Lisa. So let's have Lisa. Why don't you lead us off with this one? We have all heard local political aficionados decry the involvement of special interest groups in local politics. What role do you think special interest groups play in municipal government? Lisa, to you.
A big role. I think they play a huge role currently. Special interest, just by definition, for me, is an individual or organization that stands to gain, typically financially or primarily financially, from a decision made by the city council. And City Hall is full of special interests in that regard. If you're looking at that definition, people that, zoning attorneys or developers or lobbyists, they play a very big role, and I think it needs to be reined in. I actually would immediately look to bring forward lobbyist registration, just like they have at the state level, which would be a requirement of which would be to disclose all expenses that they've made while lobbying. So I think that is a very big problem at City Hall.
Thank you, Lisa. Bob, your perspective.
Well, of course, Lisa's definition is correct. A special interest is anybody who makes money off the city. And that would include a developer who's getting a big upzoning. It would include anybody who's got a contract with the city. It would include anybody who's getting a subsidy from the city. And whoops, I think you've got somebody else's picture up there, or at least their name, but I'll keep going. All right, so anybody who's going to make money off a city council decision is a special interest. And yeah, special interests are running the place right now. And if you don't believe it, go to the city clerk's part of the web page on the city's website and look at the campaign contributions. And you'll see who's making money off the city and who is also turning around and contributing to the candidates who are campaigning for mayor and for council. That's how you tell that the special interests are running the place, is you see what they're contributing.
Thank you, Bob. Virginia, it's you.
Thank you, Terrence. Special interest groups are important because they serve an important role of informing council members on local issues and what is important to them and what is not important to them. Special interest groups are more than just groups that have financial interest. I see long-term special interest groups protecting their neighborhood or protecting the preserve. Short-term interest groups, maybe there's a zoning case that they don't like, and we've seen that, and then they go away. But bottom line, the most important special interest group are the voters of this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Dave, to you.
Well, special interests have been defined by others. I'll just add one more. From time to time, city employees will work in zoning positions and so forth, and then immediately retire and go directly to work for developers. And they have an inside track, they believe. That's a problem. For me, special interests mean the schools, the Little League, the PTAs, the people, the preserve. These are the interests that are embedded in us. So the real interests that matter is, I agree, the resident and the businesses. And right now, we have to do everything, especially for small businesses, help them succeed. That's a special interest that speaks to me.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. They're getting on us. Suzanne, it's on you.
Well, I think that we can't call a special interest group very narrow in that it only has an interest at the city of Scottsdale. This has been mentioned by a couple of other people. And you asked this question of us, Terrence, a week or so ago in your publication. And I pointed out that there's an author who said that today everyone is organized and everyone is part of an interest group. And so we have to keep that in mind, that you might call one group a special interest group that you don't like, but another group might be working with you that you do like. So it really depends on the perspective of the person, whether or not you want to call this a good or a bad interest group. So it's made up of groups of individuals that represent all kinds of things, residents and businesses and nonprofits, et cetera. And I agree with something that David just said. And business is a special interest group that we do need to be listening to, because they are the lifeblood of this community and will provide monies to this community to keep it healthy. So it's a special interest group just as residents are. And we need to be looking out for both of them, not just one or the other.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Suzanne, lead us off on this one. Is Scottsdale too reliant on tourism? If so, what are steps the city can take to diversify its economy? If not, explain why the city's current economic makeup is sustainable.
I don't think the city is too reliant on tourism. This is our heritage. This is the way the city has developed over many years, that tourists came here for health reasons and for the open spaces and for the resorts. And this is still great, and we need to nurture that. But we also need to look at strengthening our business communities as well, so that they become a larger part of the community than they are today. I don't think 52% of the city budget relying on tourism is a good thing. And I found this in business when I worked for a large corporation many years ago, and they were reliant on one huge customer for a big part of their business. And they began diversifying because they knew that down the road that customer could run into trouble. And that customer was Sears Roebuck and is now gone. So I think diversification is great, and relying too much on one segment to support the community is not a good thing.
Thank you, Suzanne. Virginia, to you.
Thank you, Terrence. It's hard to say and criticize the golden goose called tourism in Scottsdale. And Suzanne is correct. Reliance on tourism is a good thing. However, we know that this COVID recession, that Scottsdale is feeling the pain more so than other communities within the valley, because of our greater reliance on tourism. Tourism was the first thing to go in 9/11. It was the first thing to go in COVID-19. So we need to diversify our economy, and we do that with building a greater, stronger business community with well-paying jobs, so that people can not only work here, but they can afford to live here.
Thank you, Virginia. Mr. Littlefield, to you.
Well, suggesting that Scottsdale is too dependent on tourism is kind of like saying that Silicon Valley is too dependent upon high technology. Of course, we're dependent on tourism because the very items, the very qualities that make Scottsdale a great place to live for the residents also make it a great place to visit. And in fact, I would say that we're going to, in a kind of an ironic way, benefit over the next few months from tourism, people coming here from other states like California, because we're going to be a very attractive destination. But what I don't like is the idea that somehow through toxic overdevelopment, we're actually denigrating the qualities that make this both a good place to live and a good place to visit. So no, we need to keep up with what we're good at. We need to go with our specialty, which is tourism.
Thank you, Bob. Dave, to you.
Scottsdale turns heads. Scottsdale will always turn heads. I mean, we are an attractive pocket of prosperity that brings so much talent and so much capital here. This is where they'll get their first look. The problem with people looking at budgets and criticizing tourism is that there's a place for growth, there's a place for taller buildings, and there's a place where they should not invade and encroach that area. And what we saw with Southbridge, they were going to put 150-foot buildings right on our canal. The canals are amenity. So why crush it? Why do it there? Well, you can't do it there. It invades and encroaches any more than you do it next to the preserve.
Thank you, Dave. Lisa, it's on you.
The answer is absolutely not. I don't believe that the city is too reliant on tourism at all. It's really the icing on our cake. The city doesn't have to invest much to keep Scottsdale beautiful as a worldwide destination. But we have to do just that. We have to keep Scottsdale beautiful and a worldwide destination. So it also keeps us in check to make this a stunning, relaxing target of tourists from all over the world. So I think that I have to be honest with you. I don't think the question really makes sense to me. Are we overly reliant on it? The answer is no. In terms of projected budget revenue, that's based on experience and input from the professionals, Experience Scottsdale and their board, and the city's the city's experience with tourism. So no, I don't believe we're overly reliant.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. So now, got another question for you. And Lisa, why don't you lead us off? Has the global pandemic changed your vision of the future of downtown Scottsdale?
No, it has not. I still I maintain the same vision, which I outlined previously. I think we need to be a high-end luxury destination that attracts people from all over the valley, all over the state, the country, and in fact, the world. Vibrant will maintain the vibrancy and the attractiveness that we have had, and I believe it will be restored to that end. We have to make it safer, as I outlined previously. I do think there's going to be a shift in how people work. We've now established that people can work from home and successfully. And look, we're all meeting here on Zoom. So I think that's going to be a shift. So there might be an impact on commercial uses. But in terms of what downtown and Old Town is, I think the vision just needs to keep improving.
Thank you, Lisa. Dave, to you.
Well, I've been involved with renovations in Old Town and downtown. And what the COVID-19 has brought us is to think about revising our thinking, revising how people can get basics and how people will communicate and how we can draw new customers and how we can serve our clients. For instance, even the transportation mode will change. We have to stop thinking of light rail as the only solution when there's going to be new innovation there's going to be next generation, even transportation that's not tethered. And that's going to help us evolve to better opportunities.
Thank you, Dave. Virginia, to you.
Thank you. I believe that our downtown was already changing before the pandemic. We're seeing this in Museum Square. We're seeing this in the entertainment district and changing and some of the development concepts being brought forward for different aspects of downtown. Plus, we have six hotels, boutique hotels planned for our old town. So that is already changing the landscape of downtown. I do believe that the pandemic is changing the use of office space and how corporations are looking at their footprint for office space. And in that, we need to be transformative. We need to be adaptable to meet those needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Bob, to you.
The pandemic and the lockdown that followed haven't changed the basic things that make Scottsdale special. Still the same things I said before: high standards for design and development, open space, unobstructed views, low density, and unique Western character. Now, it has changed some of the details. As Lisa pointed out, you're going to need a lot fewer office buildings because some companies are going to go totally working at home. So it's going to change the nature of development somewhat. But in terms of what makes Scottsdale special, the pandemic has not changed that. We do need to take the changes that are happening into account. We can't just put our head in the sand. We're going to have to pay attention to that. But it really hasn't changed the basics of Scottsdale.
Thank you, Bob. Suzanne, take us home.
I don't think downtown has changed because of the pandemic either. As I mentioned before, it's an active and exciting place. It was shut down temporarily, but it's starting to come back. And I think it will be still the most exciting area in the city. We've determined over the years that the greatest amount of commercial development will be along the 101, it will be downtown, and it will be the McDowell Road corridor. So downtown will still be a large commercial area. I believe that more people will continue to want to live down there. So I don't believe the pandemic has caused that to change at all. In talking to people that live in apartments and condos downtown, they love it there. They don't feel afraid to live in a high-rise building because of the pandemic. So I think we will continue to see growth and great interest in downtown, and all we can do is try to nurture that.
Thank you, Suzanne. Dave, why don't you lead us off on this one, since you brought up transportation infrastructure. Here's the question. What are your plans to improve the transportation infrastructure through Scottsdale? And what can be done to better leverage the utilization of Scottsdale Airport? Although I don't know if you can leverage that any better than it already has. But in terms of transportation infrastructure, as mayor, how would you improve that for residents?
Well, first of all, I think office buildings need to be placed closer to the 101 and those areas. For instance, Camelback is a dead end. There's no direct access to the 101. But what I started to say is that there will be new solutions evolving in the next 4 or 5 years. I'm talking about robot taxis. I'm talking about the ability of grocery stores and even the downtown. Well, the downtown has their own trolley, but that's not enough. There's actually going to be private sector development that's going to blow our minds. And we cannot overload the downtown with all of these buildings and 40,000 more people downtown and expect to preserve what we've got.
Thank you, Dave. Lisa, to you.
In terms of the transportation plan, I'm going to go back to my vision for empowering citizen input. I think that, we have very distinct areas of our city. North Scottsdale complains about traffic. Old Town, downtown complains about traffic and parking. I think impaneling area representatives in terms of a committee that would study this issue, traffic and other transportation issues, would be very, very useful. I vow to take the oath, I'm not going to make it worse in terms of traffic. I'd love to tell you exactly how to make it better, but I think that's a very complicated subject that I think we can use citizen input to deal with. Also, I would immediately look to enhance, improve, and make safer the downtown and Old Town area for pedestrians and bikes and drivers, places to park.
Thank you, Lisa. Virginia, to you.
Thank you, Terrence. So the 101 is already a parking lot. So we need to do a better job. We need to really think holistically of how we're going to move people. We import 87% of our workforce. And if you extrapolate that into the number of cars, it's anywhere from 35 to 40,000 cars in downtown alone. And it's more in the air park. So we really need to move people, and that's with a more holistic and broader look at our transportation needs and creating nodes to connect with the light rail that creates rubberized, frequent connection from, say, Priest and Washington into our downtown to move people in a flexible way and a less expensive way.
Thank you, Virginia. Suzanne, to you.
Well, the transportation network in Scottsdale consists of the roads and streets that transport cars and buses and trolleys, as well as the paths that handle the pedestrians and the bicyclists. So the transportation network is fairly broad. It's not just vehicles. And I think we need to remember that. I've worked for a number of years now on transportation issues on the RPTA board that deals with transit issues. And David's right, we are looking at autonomous circulators that could be coming in the future, which I think would be quite helpful. And also the MAG Transportation Policy Committee is working on the next step in Prop 400, and that would be an extension of Prop 400. That would, Prop 400 runs out in 2025, and so they're working on what could be called Prop 500. And in that, the city has submitted probably 74, 75 projects that they would like to have funded, which includes improving the 10,000 streetlights that we have here to put in LED lights, as well as to tie them together into a smart system. There's also a need for improving our bus routes and our trolley routes and our shared use paths. There's a number of things that I would champion in the transportation side. Thank you.
Suzanne, thank you. Bob, take us home.
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to take better care of the transportation infrastructure we have. When the last time that we were looking at a bond issue, the staff pointed out that we have $800 million in unfunded infrastructure maintenance. Why is that? Why does an affluent city like Scottsdale have that much unfunded maintenance? Well, the answer is because for the past 8 years, we have not made development pay for itself. It's obvious, you don't need to study, you can see that happen. So the first thing we need to do is when we do approve development, we need to make sure that development pays for its impact on the infrastructure. I anticipate that, as Lisa pointed out, more and more people are going to work from home, and the demand for office space, which is already declining in Scottsdale, will get lower. And so that will lead to less impact on the roads. I definitely am opposed to light rail. Why would we bring in 18th or 19th century technology in?
Thank you, Bob. Well, that was very good. I have one more question, and then we'll go into final comments. Virginia, start us off. As mayor, how would you improve the symbiotic relationship between the municipality and local school district?
What a great question. Education has been a focus of mine for decades, and have chaired many Yes to Children override elections successfully to better fund our schools. So number one, how you better that symbiotic relationship is provide the leadership and stand tall for the overrides that our school districts need. We also need to get back to conversations, and the city and the school district stopped having regular meetings years ago that talk about mutual benefits. And I think that conversations are going to be critical, particularly as we move forward to build a good education system for the city.
Thank you, Virginia. Bob, to you.
Well, technically in Arizona, school districts and municipalities are totally separate entities, unlike big cities back east where the cities run the schools. They have separate governing bodies and they have separate budget. But that doesn't mean there's nothing that cities can do to help the schools succeed. And I certainly want that to happen. Both my kids are graduates of Scottsdale Unified, and so is my wife, who went to Ingleside and Arcadia. When I was first elected to the city council in 2002, I served on the joint Scottsdale Unified School District and City Council subcommittee. This committee was tasked with finding ways SUSD and the city could cooperate to the mutual benefit of our constituents. And if I'm elected mayor, I will work to restore this committee, which unfortunately was disbanded. I also spent 5 years on the Youth Sports Task Force that coordinated the efforts to have the City Parks Department help SUSD maintain their sports fields when they did not have the budget to keep them in good shape.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Lisa, to you.
Thank you. As Bob just pointed out, Scottsdale City City Council does not have decision-making power over Scottsdale Unified. But certainly as mayor, I would try to have as much influence on positive impact on school as possible. And we shouldn't short sell that, because there's certainly an opportunity to get involved on that level. And I also, I'm on the board of the Scottsdale Charros organization. And boy, is that just a great example of how a nonprofit, helps the Scottsdale school systems. And there's a great collaborative effort between the Charros and the city. And so it's just empowering groups like that and being really supportive of organizations that really support our schools. Having top-rated schools is very important in Scottsdale, and that's a reason people look at when they consider moving here and doing business here. So we have to make improvements in that regard.
Thank you, Lisa. Suzanne, to you.
I agree that we should build a better relationship with the entire school system, and that would not just be the school district, though. I would reach out to the Scottsdale Community College, as well as there's the East Valley Institute of Technology that's a trade school that works with the local school district. I think there's a variety of ways that I, as mayor, could help bring those groups together and talk about what are we going to do to better educate the students that live in Scottsdale and that will be looking for jobs in the future, and how will they feed into a system of either a university or finding a job. And I think that's a really big question that needs to be answered among all the people that are working within the educational areas today and the mayor of Scottsdale.
Thank you, Suzanne. Dave, take us home.
Well, I believe in a K through 14 school system. And when I was vice mayor, I did serve on the joint city council and school board committee. We met every other month because that's a critical role. We serve the same families and we need to unify our after school programs. But I will go even further. So that will be instituted as mayor. The other one would be to unify with the Maricopa community district as well. So it's a complete city when we have a complete K through 14 education system working together with the city.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Well, we got through 12 questions. Very well done. That concludes our question and answer segment. Now we're going to move into closing remarks. We're going to do it in reverse order from the opening remarks. So, Mr. Ortega, when you're ready, take it away.
Thank you. The relationship with City Hall was fractured before the COVID-19 pandemic. They failed to unify the city with a vision written by residents, called the general plan. City Hall was so disconnected that citizens had to pass an initiative to stop them from building commercial projects in the preserve. Now, I repeatedly told the council that the South Bridge and its 12-story buildings were wrong for Old Town, but they wouldn't listen. It took a citizen-driven referendum to get them to back down. We must change course. I'm prepared to be mayor because I will listen to the residents and businesses. I'll learn from their points of view and use my architect skills to lead to solutions which reinforce our Scottsdale brand. I will listen, learn, and lead. Meet me at electdaveortegamayor.com.
Well done, perfectly. Suzanne, to you.
Thank you for the questions. My final message is
Oh,
that.
no, Suzanne, I'm sorry. I messed that up. Bob, it's to
Let me
you.
stop. Okay,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
okay.
Bob, it's on you.
Am I unmuted? Okay.
Yes, you're
So,
unmuted now.
you've asked a lot of questions here to which we were supposed to give 30-second answers, and many of those deserve 30-minute answers or 30-hour answers. If you go to my website, boblittlefield.com, I have a detailed list of all my positions that people can look at, and they can also join my mailing list there, ask me questions, and find out where I stand on any issue that we haven't discussed here. But the bottom line for me is this: my combination of my municipal experience, my business experience, and my community activism, the only one of the candidates who supported 420, who worked on Southbridge, makes me the one who's most uniquely qualified, not only to preserve the best of Scottsdale's past, but to move ahead into Scottsdale's future. And that's why I ask for your votes.
Thank you, Bob. Virginia, it is now your turn.
Thank you, Terrence. For 33 plus years, I have remained committed to our community. I have the business and financial background, management skills, and community knowledge to lead us out of this COVID recession and get Scottsdale back on track to health and resiliency. We will reinvent Scottsdale by growing tourism, attracting and retaining businesses, build upon our great school systems, lead the efforts for retail sales tax reform, and initiate an urban forest program, and finally call for Scottsdale Conversations 2050 visioning process to bring our community together with a common vision. I ask for you to vote for Virginia Cordy for mayor. Leadership matters.
Thank you, Virginia. Suzanne, it is now definitely your turn. I'm sorry again. All right.
Okay. Well, I want to emphasize that I got results for Scottsdale residents a number of times while I've been on the council, and I will get results for them as well as mayor. I'm the only candidate in this mayoral race to have successfully led on all 3 ballot issues that have been approved by the voters in recent years. I led on the Yes for Streets campaign for transportation improvement projects that was approved by the voters in 2018. Bob is wrong. I did support the yes vote on 420 when it went to the ballot, and I made sure that I even wrote a letter and put it in the ballot pamphlet. I also helped build consensus that led to a yes vote for funding 58 capital improvement projects in 2019. So I have the ability and the experience to bring the council and citizens together and reach consensus as mayor. So I ask you to look at my website, which is suzanneclapp.com, and I ask for your vote on August 4th. Thank you.
Well done. Lisa, for you.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited for the opportunity to serve all of the residents of Scottsdale. I think my work on the council demonstrated I educate myself in the issues. I care about the citizens' input. I care about having citizens serve closely and work closely with the council in making decisions. I love this quote from Mayor Herb Drinkwater. One of the reasons that Scottsdale is such a special place is our citizens, caring, involved people who take an active part in the development of our city. That is certainly a theme for my service as mayor, and values that I subscribe to. And I pledge to the citizens of Scottsdale to really protect their interests and bring the city forward with respect for our past and making our future better. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So in closing, this forum has been recorded. is available on Scottsdale City Channel 11, as well as via YouTube from our hosts, the Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce, the Scottsdale Coalition of Today and Tomorrow, Scottsdale Leadership, Independent News Media at yourvalley.net, and to the Times Media Group at scottsdaleprogress.org. Thank you again to our hosts, the City of Scottsdale, all of those that joined the program today, the candidates. It went remarkably well, I thought. Next week, we have the City Council candidates, and that forum will be the same bat time, same bat channel as today. And thank you, everyone. And that concludes our program for the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Terrence.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
I don't know how to leave, but
Wow.
we're leaving now. All right. Goodbye.